You're tuned into Zero Signal, a show about what they won't say and what you're probably already thinking. No fluff, no filters, no bullshit. Let's crack it open.
At this time, I'm going to ask you to fasten your seatbelts.
This episode dives into one of the most ambitious and perhaps controversial experiments in modern governance, a semi-autonomous city called Prospera, located on the island of Roatán, just off the northern coast of Honduras. Before we begin, let me make something very clear. Everything discussed in this episode is based on publicly available sources, including company websites, media reports, and government statements. The goal here is to analyze and question, not to accuse or defame. All individuals and organizations mentioned are presumed to be acting within the bounds of applicable law unless proven otherwise. Now, with that said, let's dig in. Prospera is what's known as a charter city, launched in 2017 by a U.S.-based company called Honduras Prospera Inc, which is registered in the state of Delaware. The city isn't just a business zone. It's essentially its own legal microstate, operating with independent laws, tax codes, and even its own arbitration courts, separate from the national system of Honduras. The ideal behind Prospera is to create a deregulated hub that attracts foreign investment by making it easy to start a business, resolve disputes privately, and avoid the bureaucracy and inefficiencies often found in developing nations. It was founded by Eric Bremen, a Venezuelan-born finance executive, and Gabriel Delgado Aliu, a Guatemalan entrepreneur. Their vision was fueled by investments from well-known libertarian and tech personalities, including Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, and Patri Friedman, all through entities like Promos Capital, which is known for backing experimental governance projects. Prospera is governed using a unique structure. Around 44% of its ruling council is appointed directly by the company, and another 22% of the votes are given to landowners. With more land, meaning more influence. That's not just a metaphor. That's actually how the model works. To put it plainly, if you're a large investor, you wield large political power. If you're a local resident without land, you simply don't. Critics have argued this amounts to a corporate monarchy, where democratic norms are replaced by shareholder rights. Proponents claim it's a necessary innovation, a kind of governance startup that could be more efficient and prosperous than traditional models. Either way, it's a dramatic departure from representative democracy. In 2022, the political climate in Honduras changed. The newly elected government under President Castro repealed the independent city law that allowed zones like Prospera to operate. The state's reason? National sovereignty. But Prospera wasn't about to pack up and leave. Instead, its parent company launched a $10.7 billion legal claim against the Honduran government under international trade laws, particularly CAFTA, which is the Central American Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement with the U.S. The claim is essentially this. Honduras changed the rules mid-game, and now the investors are demanding compensation for lost opportunities. Depending on your point of view here, this is either a defense of international investor rights or it's a case of private entity trying to strong-arm a sovereign nation. Now, here's where things take an interesting turn, from politics to biotech experimentation. One of the startups operating in Prospera is called MiniCircle, a Delaware-registered company conducting human gene therapy trials within the city's jurisdiction. These include experimental treatments for HIV, muscular dystrophy, ALS, and life extension therapies involving follistatin, a gene linked to muscle growth and anti-aging effects. Because Prospera isn't bound by FDA or European regulatory systems, these trials can proceed far faster and far cheaper than they could in the United States. According to MiniCircle, a clinical trial that would cost millions in the US can be launched in Prospera for just a fraction of the cost in under a year. There's also Infantita, a community focused on radical life extension, decentralized science, and blockchain-based healthcare. Its founder, Nicolas Anazinger, envisions a space where people can take more control over their health outside of traditional medical hierarchies. This isn't science fiction. These projects are actively underway, but not everyone is on board. The Honduran Ministry of Health has declared some of these human trials illegal and unauthorized, warning they may endanger participants and bypass necessary and needed safety protocols. And in 2024, biohacking communities in Prospera reportedly began experimenting with implantable tech, including magnetic fingertip implants and other body augmentation like RFID chips implanted in their hands. This raises a question: how much freedom is too much? And at what point does radical innovation become dangerous and exploitative? Economically, Prospera isn't just a biotech hub, it's a crypto forward jurisdiction. Bitcoin is legal tender, and residents can become e-citizens from anywhere in the world. Administrative tasks, from identity verification to dispute resolution, are handled through a digital governance platform inspired by Estonia's e-government model. This is part of a larger vision to decentralize not just finance, but governance itself. In theory, you don't need a passport. You just need a wallet and an address. Again, some call it revolutionary. Others call it a way to bypass accountability and remove political protections from the public. Despite pushback, Prospera is still expanding. They've partnered with Magneto Wad, a single-knees entrepreneur, to explore a new zone called Prospera Africa. And they're looking at trade corridors with similar legal loopholes that could support more charter cities. They also continue building on Roatán Island with biotech facilities, startup incubators, and infrastructure projects aimed at attracting global talent and digital nomads. But the future remains unclear. Honduran government is fighting to reassert control. Legal battles are ongoing, and the ethical questions are stacking up. Here's what we know. Prospera is a real place. It exists today. It is home to real businesses, real experiments, and real legal disputes. Depending on your worldview, it's either a beacon of progress or a canary in a coal mine for a privatized, post-democratic world. This story isn't over yet, and like many modern frontiers, the boundaries between innovation and overreach are still being drawn. Now I've got to ask you, brother, do you see this kind of governance as a genuine opportunity for progress or a troubling move away from democratic norms?
There's a ton of regulation in the United States. There's a ton of regulation in the EU. So I think it's great that companies can go out and bypass that regulation, but at the same time, I think it's bad because the FDA and everything else we have set up in this country is meant to have stuff that is controlled. And if something terrible happens or there's a terrible side effect, they cut it immediately. So I almost think it's a way to circumvent some of those agencies we have in place. And who's watching them? Making sure everything's done ethically, scientific, and who they're reporting it to. You can't really find a whole lot about the accountability structure there, especially in terms of business governance, medical governance. It almost seems like a tax shelter for super rich people. They can send their pet projects down there, not have the government looking over their back, spend money that instead of spending millions, maybe they're spending pennies on the dollar to do some of the research they want to do. And then I know another concept that kind of came up was corporate colonialism. So what's to keep mega corporations? And I even argue, even in our country, like we live in a corporatocracy where big corporations, big donor control our politicians. They're sliding under the table and they're paying them off for the votes. It's probably much easier to go down there and do it and just pay off the local government and have them turn a blind eye. But it sounds like the government there trying to push back a little bit, and they're out to ask questions.
And it reminds me of the oligarchs that you see in Russia, where the minority controls the majority. Though at times, like in the United States, we still have some of them, right? Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all the multi-billionaires that we see that have influence over culture and politics within the United States. But what's really interesting about places like Prospera is it's distilled down. It's this really small environment that's run by these very powerful people. If we talk about ChatGPT and we talk about the revolution of artificial intelligence, Sam Altman is invested. So these very powerful people are coming together. And not only are they having their wild ideals, wild theories, some may be beneficial, some may help people see or walk again, some might help folks, but inevitably there's going to be some bad things that come out of there. How I think about this is that our world is really ruled by the almighty dollar. We're going to do things to make that money. And it may not always be beneficial, but now, as you said, they're cutting out the loopholes. They are voting themselves. Voting is based on landowner rights and the amount of property you have. So it's really almost empowering people like the more you own, the more influence you have within the society. And I think that's what kind of scares me. And as we start to look at places like Prospera in different kind of tech startup cities that are within these Honduran environments where they can make and have their own laws, where I think we start to trend more towards like the one world kind of government prototype. And when you look at it, the book of Revelations really warns of global authority that rises in the final stage, a centralized power rolling over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Prospera, though in a very kind of micro scale, reflects this concept with really stunning precision in my mind. It bypasses national laws. It builds its own arbitration courts. So if you get in trouble, yeah, the people in Prospera are the ones that's going to find you wrong, and they're going to give you whatever your sentence is or your penalty, whether it be monetary or prison. And I don't know if they've ever even crossed those bridges yet. But they have their own courts, and it's online. It's worldwide. It's not just in Prospera. It's an arbitration court that's all over. I use it in my current company to arbitrate findings, and we do that on a lot of contractual negotiation. They just offer citizenship to everybody to build this mighty civilization. And again, there could be some very good aspects of it. But if you put that power in the wrong people's hands, I worry about what could transpire.
Yeah, I think they're still subject to the criminal law of Honduras. So I think the courts they have set up there are more for business contracts, that type of arbitration. I'm like 99% sure that if somebody commits a crime, they're still subject to the Honduran government. Did you find that to be the case too? That's what my research told me.
I think there's a big battle going on. Obviously, with the election of the new president there in Honduras, there's kind of a struggle. They want to have more influence in these kind of micro independent cities. But if you ask a representative of somebody like Prospera, they're going to say that they roll and govern their own society. Like they make their own laws, they enforce their own laws. I was actually even looking at one of their websites to see what types of jobs were available. And it was like, I forget the exact title of the job, but it was basically like lead security officer, which was basically like the chief of police that would enforce the laws and regulations within that environment. I have the background for it, so with my law enforcement career and stuff. If I did not apply, no, I'm not going to Prospera. They feel like they really can. And this in Honduras here is really a test bed. And what we're seeing now is the expansion of it. So they want to go to other countries where maybe they have more control and influence within that environment. And I think that's really concerning because if a billionaire says you're impeding progress because I'm going to throw you in jail, and that's the law now, that's pretty troubling of what direction we're headed in.
Yeah, the other thing I found interesting, so I was curious about the tax rate. So like in this ZA or this special economic zone that they have set up, the flat tax, it's a flat tax, which I think is brilliant. I think every government should impose a flat tax instead of income, state, local, all that crap. So it has a flat tax of 5%, has a business tax of 1%, and it has 0% gains tax. And so they collect the money and then they give 12% of that pile that they collect to the government. So I'm like, wow, this seems like a tax shelter more than anything else. They keep the money. In the US, there's like 15% capital gains tax, and all the tax brackets. And like it's much more significant than a 5% flat income tax. And business taxes can be brutal here, and capital gains tax sometimes that can keep people from actually investing their money because they don't want to hold on to it for a year or hold on to their investment for a year.
Did you get the opportunity to see how people pay their tax bill?
Yeah, through Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing down there.
It's a huge thing. They're like one of the first transactional societies that rely solely on Bitcoin in order to pay their bills within their society. That also kind of harkens back, right, to that one world government of how you can use one item to have transactions across the world. Not that you couldn't use the almighty dollar within any region, but Bitcoin's the same. A dollar's worth a lot more in China versus Singapore. The exchange rates change as you pay your bills, but Bitcoin doesn't. It's on the blockchains. It's all these things are starting to like build around to like get towards that like kind of one world government. I think is a little bit scary.
Yeah, but man, can you imagine? So all those cryptos, especially Bitcoin, stabilized over the past like 12 months. But dude, like one day it might be $117,000 per Bitcoin. The next 6 months later, it might be $60,000. So I mean, that's pretty wild that you're holding on to a currency that is that volatile. And you think about it. Say you're providing a service there, and you're paying with Bitcoin and you're stashing it. Heck, you might wake up one day and be a multimillionaire just because Bitcoin took off. But no, I do agree with you. The blockchain is scary. I know the government here in the U.S. is anti-CBDC, which essentially is just saying they don't want to spy on you with your crypto. They claim they don't want to track you. But every transaction has to be validated through the blockchain. So every transaction, every wallet, they know who owns the wallet. They see what wallet it's going to. They can make the inference as to what you bought. And the scary thing at the end, like in Revelations, at the end of time, he says you can't buy, sell, or trade without the mark. And the way to do that is to get rid of any sort of fiat currency, any sort of paper, even trying to get rid of bartering. So then if they implement it, the blockchain would be a perfect tool to debank someone, to take away all their money, to put a freeze on their crypto wallet. I think China does some of that stuff now. I was watching a YouTube video where they're so heavily monitored with cameras and everything else, and they have the social credit system. If you jaywalk, because they're tracking you on an app, they'll just, instead of getting a ticket and choosing to go to court, they'll just fine you on your phone, and you'll get a text saying $20 was charged because of this ticket. And that's freaking wild, and that is super scary.
They actually do it with speeding as well. So they monitor your phone and knowing how long it gets from point A to point B. If you get there too fast, they just shoot you a speeding ticket for it.
That's not right. Talk about ultimate control. Can you imagine? Say we're doing this podcast. Let's fast forward 10 years. And we say something on this podcast. Next thing we go to the checkout, try to scan our cards or scan our Bitcoin wallet or whatever. And it's like you're froze out. And you don't even have an explanation just because maybe we criticize someone or something or some policy. Can you imagine that, bro? That would be rough.
I lived in Hong Kong for a little while, so it wasn't under the same rules and regulations of mainland. I got to see some of it. And people were really scared of this kind of social score that was assigned to folks. They were kind of controlled by it, right? Because not only, it wasn't just like, oh, you're a bad person, you were shunned by society. It was tied to your credit score. So if you got arrested or you did something bad, your social score would drop down. And because of that, now you can't apply for a loan to like buy a house. So a lot of people were in fear of it, right? That they were going to take the proper actions and follow along the path. But maybe that comes next for these types of startups. Like how much more can they tie into control in order to achieve their ends means? I know that there's a lot of powerful billionaires out there. I know I worked for one at Amazon Web Services, and the more he can squeeze out of you, the better off he was, right? That's why he's living on yachts. And you got, when I worked, the top salary was, if you were a CEO of a company, the step down from Jeff, the top salary during that time was $100K. That's the most you could make. You get RSUs, but that was the most you could make during that time. I think it's changed a little bit now that Andrew Jassy has come along, but that influence, right, of these very powerful people, I think is what's ultimately concerning. But as we kind of walk it back and we talk about all the stuff that they're doing over there in Prospera, in which they could be doing in many parts of the world, and as we continue to talk about this one world government and the revelations, I think the next big scary thing is the implant technology that they're doing today. And I don't know if you've seen any of these. I'm going to call out Yes Theory because I watched their YouTube video, but they're doing a lot of these implant technologies. And as you talked about the mark on the hand or on the forehead, they're doing these types of implants. I saw magnets get implanted in fingertips, right? And they're supposedly giving them like another sense. A lot of electricians are doing them so they could feel the right wire to pull when they're working in the field. But it ultimately doesn't stop there. They're doing some good things. They're doing some stuff with stem cell therapy to help folks, but this is just what they're telling us, right, of what they're implanting. And a lot of it's for vanity reasons, right? Like we always think about like breast augmentation. That's a vanity thing that we do in the United States. But a lot of these things are for vanity. They just kind of want to be upgraded, almost like a cyborg human being. And like, where does that stop? That's what ultimately really scares me, because I think I saw it get implanted on the right hand in that video. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with everything, like it starts off small. So they want to make it cool and trendy, and they get this implant and you can do all these cool things with it. Who knows what they can do with it? Obviously, Elon Musk has Neuralink. And did you see that story about the dude who's paraplegic? They implanted something in his head and he's able to play video games just with his mind. It's wild.
I did. Yeah.
It's crazy. So just think about the amount of information you can sort through in a short amount of time. I'm sitting here looking at the screen. I have all these tabs up. I'm trying to look at the video stream. Imagine if you just sit back as you're talking. I can just close my eyes or even look at the screen and just see everything I needed to see. But it always starts very innocuous, very innocent. And like you said, and vanity is a big thing, or even for health reasons. But it is scary. But I just don't think you can say, if you're the devil trying to bring the Antichrist around, I don't think you can just wake up one morning, everyone's getting a chip in their hand and or their forehead. You can't do that because nobody would buy it. So I think over the coming years, decades, 99% of the people are going to have some sort of implantable technology in their body. And the selling point is going to be health. It's going to be the ability to learn instantaneously. Imagine if you had a chip in your head and I can learn Spanish in 30 seconds because all those neural pathways are built instantly. The chip's able to communicate. You're going to have AI in your head, man. You're going to have a demon in your head telling you the worst, terrible crap eventually.
It's ultimately about normalizing it, getting people used to it. I think we talked a little bit about that in Project Blue, right? Like just getting people used to the ideal, regardless of what it is. So when the next big step happens, that everybody's got an implant. What's the big deal? As we kind of reflect back on the mark of the beast and implantable technology in Revelation 13, 16 through 17, the mark of the beast is really described as a condition for buying and selling, right? Placed on the right hand or the forehead. And what I start seeing is like they're doing these implants in their hands, probably among other places. And they're also doing Bitcoin at the same time. So how soon does that connect where they're just starting to pay with their hands and they're starting to buy and sell with these implants that they have for it as well? Like to me, I'm starting to see those breadcrumbs as we come along. And starting to see this connective tissue as we go down the way.
They're definitely building the infrastructure. You remember these 10, 15, when we were
cell
growing up.
phones.
Oh, how many people had these when we were kids? Very few.
Very few.
Now little kids have them. The next thing is something you implant here or here. And you won't need this probably in 20 years because I can make a phone call with the implant in my head, somewhere in my body. I could just think about calling Dave and it's going to ring or whatever it does. And we'll be having a conversation. You probably won't have to speak, man. You can just hear my thoughts. But like you said, this is normal now. This wasn't normal 20 years ago. But like you said, it's all about conditioning, normalizing, and just making life so difficult if you didn't have one. Life for me would be difficult if I didn't have this bad boy.
100%. I think a lot about that, how much technology has come along the way, because even, I was driving to the grocery store today. You really don't think about it, but you have GPS now. So if you're going to like a special restaurant to take your wife to, you pop the GPS on and you follow Google Maps to like that restaurant.
Yeah.
15 years ago, we didn't have that. I remember printing out map instructions to drive back to college, right? And hoping I don't miss a street because if I did, it ain't going to reroute me.
You remember when we were little, we're going back 5, 6, 7, 8. Mom and Dad used to have freaking maps. And they used to bust out the map and Mom would plot the course. And then inevitably they would miss a turn and have to like get lost in the middle of nowhere. You go to the gas station, try to figure out where you're at because you're so unfamiliar with the area. If I didn't have GPS, I don't know how I get to 90% of the places I go to that are outside of my town.
It's great. I remember when I was going back to college that one time, I actually missed a turn and I ended up in like downtown Columbus, like the hood. And I like pulled off on the side of the road and asked some random dude, like, how do I get back to the highway so I know how to find my way? He's like, yeah, you shouldn't be in this town. I'm like, I know. I'm not trying to be in this town. I want to go.
But I want to circle back real quick. Most of the quote unquote residents of Prospera or e-residents, you know what that is?
There's a lot. Yeah. So they're just they're paying a bill. It's kind of really, as you said, like a tax shelter at that point in time.
But I think there's something, I had this info somewhere. Let me pull it up here because I think most of the full-time residents, I think they're Hondurans for the most part. People just kind of doing the cooking, laundry, maintenance. I think there might only be, and they have a bunch of seasonal quote unquote residents too, but most of them are e-residents.
Did you happen to see a figure of how many e-residents or just residents in general? Because I never actually found one.
Yeah, I had it on my notes and of course it decided to delete itself.
As we speak about lovely technology.
Yeah, speaking of, 20 years ago, we couldn't do a podcast. You're like,
Yeah.
No clue. All right. So some natural person residents as of August 30th, 2024. 79 full-time physical residents living on site. 443 full e-residents, essentially remote residents with full rights. and then 1,271 limited e-residents, partially enrolled resident. I don't even know what that means. Additionally, 230 registered businesses, legal entities also hold e-resident status there. So it's not super huge. It sounds like it's growing though. I was reading some article about, I think they're building a new apartment complex there, and as of April, they had already sold half of the units. So it
Wow.
sounds like something that is gaining traction and interest, and I assume it has everything to do with regulation and being a tax shelter.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many people live there full time. I know they like bought a resort on the right island because Roatan's actually a lot of people go there to vacation, but they actually bought it for their citizens before they could build the infrastructure on the island. And I know the apartment building you're talking about, it's actually the tallest building in Roatán today. What would be really interesting to find out is how many people actually live there full time, like versus
so-
just like vacation there, go there for a week.
Yeah, so here it says 79. So 79 people live there full time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So not many.
Not many.
It's really interesting.
I just also like watching that video on YouTube. It didn't seem like I could probably look this up when I'm being lazy right now. It didn't seem like they actually had a lot of land. Like they had the beautiful resort, and then tucked away on its side was the actual, I guess, corporate entity with a big building and some smaller buildings where they, I guess, have offices or whatever. But it didn't look like it was super large.
Yeah, it's not too big. I didn't see the figure you told me, but I haven't seen the figure yet of how many people live there, but it's not a ton of people. It almost looks like a resort when you dig into the facts and you see the video of a lot of the YouTubers that are going out there today. I think it's more about versus theory versus concept when we talk about Prospera. Like maybe Prospera is not doing anything wrong by versus just being a place for a bunch of really wealthy people to come together and do some important stuff. But I can see that kind of transcending that. And if you get somebody that's very powerful and perhaps very evil, what could they do to make these changes? If you can get around the FDA, if you can get around the European Governing Authority for implant technology, a lot of the times what I think about is the Nephilim legacy. When we see in Genesis 6, and the angels come down to earth and they kind of procreate with women. And God finds this really bad, and he ultimately kills them through the flood during Moses' lifetime. But we're starting to see people that are getting enhanced, and we're just at the beginning. That cell phone that you're talking about, or the GPS that we were talking about, who knows what they're going to be implanting next, and who knows the reason why they're going to implant it next, which I think is ultimately very concerning in my mind.
It's ultimately control. I mean, I almost feel like like with the AI and the way it's expanding, and with the Neuralink, it's just a way to interact with AI, which is, I think, terrifying because part of me thinks AI is giving voices to demons, and it gives you instantaneous knowledge. So this is interesting. I just looked this up. So the original property of Prospera was only 58 acres. Apparently now they've expanded to 1,000 acres. So it sounds like they're trying to add on significantly to that property or to that region.
They actually envision it to be like the size of Singapore as they want to continue to expand their property and build out as well. And you wonder, is with their expansion to Africa, what else controls are they looking for? Why would they leave that environment if they're continuing to expand? I know they're facing the Honduran government, who doesn't agree with everything they're doing, but what are they looking for from this kind of expansion when they're not done there? Like it's almost like a test bed and they're just getting started. So like, why are they going to Africa now to do other things?
Like, it kind of reminds me of like the Romans, right? So the Romans at one point in time had the biggest empire in the world. And it wasn't like they had Roman citizens there. They just had outposts. And almost that seems like corporate outposts to control local governments. And you have to start with the smaller, less powerful governments to wield that influence before you can branch out into the more technologically and politically advanced wealthy nations. But it seems like a first step of what seems to be many to get to that conclusion where you have these billionaires that have these corporate outposts that control the local area financially. And, again, we're talking about blockchain, Bitcoin, implants. They kind of wield their power and kind of throw their weight around.
Let me ask you, it's an interesting question that just popped into my mind, but we talk about the devil's playbook of how he's going to implement his plan for revelation. Like, put yourself into those shoes. Like, how would you implement it? How would you take over the world? You're a smart guy. Like, you probably could if you really wanted to. How would you go about that? Do you think that blockchain fits into that plan? Do you think implants fit into that plan? How would you go about implementing it?
So I think the first thing you have to do is cause division. Kind of like what we have in this country. You have two halves, left and right. Or you have America versus Russia, Europe versus Russia, China versus US. You have to sow that division and grow that hate. I think ultimately, and I think it's pretty evident in the Bible, there's a huge war that kills billions. And at some point, and you can imagine if nukes are dropping on the major cities around the world, at one point you're gonna be like, time out, we're good. I don't want to see my kids get vaporized. I don't want to die. I don't want to have to deal with this fallout. And so I think step one is cause division to where everyone hates each other, where you can't agree on anything. You like the smallest difference in the other person is magnified so much that you actually hate them. You're so ingrained, entrenched with your side that you can't even reach across the aisle to say, hey, I think we can come to compromise. So these people or the devil just wants us entrenched like a World War I battle where if you try to cross this field, you're getting mowed down by a machine gun. So I think that's step one. I think step two is a global war where everybody gets scared to death that the world is actually going to end. And then you have the infrastructure of this CBDC, the mark or the implants. That way you can control and make everyone feel safe. Just like 9/11, everyone gave up their freedoms. Look, just like the virus we just experienced not too long ago. You're afraid for your life and for your family, so you give up all your rights. This is going to be a major war and say, hey, this is the game plan, guys. We're going to go with it. We're going to implant, this guy came and made peace. Like he's our new God. You have to do this. This is what's best for humanity. But I think we're right. We're on that cusp. And I don't think the world's been more divided in, at least since I've been alive. Before we were kids, like we fought World War II. Everybody in the country, no one really hated the president. That's kind of a new deal. Like you may not agree with some of his policies, but everybody was on the same page. Like the stuff on the periphery was, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to vote Republican. I don't agree with that, so I'm going to vote Democrat. Or this guy just seems cooler. But at the end of the day, everyone kind of had the best interests of the country. Now it's just left and right, bro.
100%. And that left and right is so far apart. Like as we talk about gender modification, really just ideals and principles. I see modern day America as a lot like the Roman Empire, and you're kind of waiting for the fall almost as we have that ideology embedded within us. It's interesting because you say war, like as they say in the Bible, wars and rumors of wars are going to happen. And what that means is ultimately that your fear of having nuclear bombs. And we see that symbolism in the Bible where I think it's Paul who sees the meteorites that fall out of the sky. And a lot of people say those are missiles that are dropping on societies. And we're almost seeing that. Like we're on the cusp of World War III as we see Russia fight against Ukraine, as you see the United States fight against Iran, as you see Israel fight against Iran and Hezbollah, and multiple other countries that are fighting today. And if you're not fighting, you're kind of scared that you're going to. Just like India, right? The India-Pakistan war, which lasted only a couple of days, but everybody's like, this is going to be the next nuke drop because these are both nuclear-powered and arsenal nations that are going to occur. And it's that fear that drives in. And enough fear, as you said, with COVID, where people are going to, okay, I will give up my freedoms in order to keep me safe. I see that a lot with the end of time because I will give you whatever you want. Just let me live in my home, go to the grocery store and live my life. And, that's where it gets scary because how much freedom, it's a balancing act. How much freedom is too much freedom? How much push and pull that you're willing to give and take in order to see the proper end. So during World War II, many people were ready to give up their full-time jobs, join the war effort, fight against the Nazis. If they couldn't go to war because they were female, they joined manufacturing. They start building stuff in support of the war. And they gave up all of their opportunities and freedoms they had in the United States in order to kind of defend that final outcome. It's ultimately I start to think about, it's like, what does it take? COVID had some, as you said, COVID had some really big impacts on our society. And a lot of people gave up those freedoms. But I think it's that multiple of 10. And when we talk about implants, right, like how I see that come about where it's almost routine as, hey, you got to get this implant to beat this virus or to stay safe from the Russian government or whatever the case may be, where people are just inclined to have the implant to keep them safe. I think we live in a world where knowledge is power. And as we talked about in our last episode, what you see is not always what you're going to believe. Right? So you have to have that kind of faith baked into it and have that knowledge baked into it to make the right decisions along the way. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I think discernment, like reading the word, being in the word, discerning the spirits and discerning your environment. And that's huge. A lot of people lack that. There's a lot of smart people, man, with lots of education that are really freaking dumb. You know, and to go back to your war thing, like it's evident that they're building the control grid and the infrastructure to absorb the fallout and to plug something. We're going to take you out of this plug and we're going to put you in this plug. Oh, I think the government after this catastrophic war is obviously it's going to be a one world government and the control grid is being built as we speak. You know, sometimes too, I look at Prospera and I'm like, we're seeing technology that was around. I remember seeing a guy get an implant in his hand like 20 years ago. So we're kind of just seeing the rendition of stuff that is already here. It's been here. I can't imagine the stuff they're actually working on in these labs in this country, like these mega corporations. Sometimes I look at Prospera and I'm like, yeah, is it more of a distraction from what's really going on here? Or is it just the kindergarten level of practice to see if this corporatism, this corporate colonialism will actually float? And if not, we'll bail from it and try something different.
you see so many crazy things that are going on in Prospera. So you see MiniCircle, the Infinite City, Unlimited Bio, Symbiotic Labs. Some of those folks are working on really good things like cure for HIV, which is really important. And they're getting around like the FDA and the European governance to kind of speed up those things, to speed up those cures, to deliver them to humanity. And ultimately, it's governed by the almighty dollar. We see a lot in the United States. They rather sell you the treatment versus the cure because that's how they're going to make money. But folks are getting around these controls. And you know what kind of strikes me is so they're working on some really important things, and that's what they tell us. But what are they not telling us? But have you ever seen that guy? I can't remember his name, but he's a guy that's trying to live forever, right? So he's
Dude,
like
I was gonna bring him up, Brian Johnson. Yep.
Brian Johnson. Yep, that's him. And, you know, he's done everything to. I think he like injected plasma of his kids in order to like reduce his age, and he does look pretty young. I think he's 60, so he does look pretty young. Whatever he's doing is like, no, he's not.
He's 40. He's 47.
Oh, he's 47.
Yeah. He looks like a vampire too.
Percent looks like a vampire. He's an investor in
Sucking the kid's
Prospera.
blood out, man.
Yeah. He's actually an investor in Prospera. Like he's working in the MiniCircle and in order to have de-aging kind of experiments going on as well. Which I don't know, it's a little creepy for me as you start to bring all these people to right. Like you're talking about Brian Johnson, who looks like a vampire. We're talking about artificial intelligence, where Sam Altman's going. What is the end? What is the end game here? Why do all the billionaires and like the weirdos have to come together at this point in time? It's really crazy to me.
Yeah, I've actually watched. There's a Netflix kind of documentary on him. I think it's called. I can't remember what it's called. I'll look it up later. But he actually went there and got follistatin therapy, follistatin gene therapy.
Okay.
It's supposedly follistatin helps you like build muscle mass. It's just signals your body to build muscle mass. And I think at the end, like after 3 or 4 months, like he had put on an additional 12% of muscle mass. Whether or not that's diet, exercise, who knows? But sometimes I'm like, are these people trying to sell crap? Are they trying to give you hope for gene therapy when maybe it's complete crap? My fear with gene therapy is you're altering a gene or you're injecting a gene through a virus vector. What is it doing that you don't know? Like our genome's so complicated, so long. Like, yeah, you might get big and jacked, but is your anus going to fall off in 3 years? You don't know what you're doing.
I'll take a pass on that one.
Yeah, I'd rather keep my butthole. Just saying. There has to be some priority there. Wild stuff.
Yeah, it's like I think Prospera is a mixed bag of people that are going there to pay a little bit less tax burden, doing some good research, doing some odd research that's just for vanity's sake. But I'm the kind of guy that's worried about the next step and what's going to become of this. If I think I could go start my own country tomorrow and move to Africa, doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Like a Family Guy episode. I declare this Jay Stania or something. I don't follow your laws or rules. I don't pay taxes.
Eric Brimman actually went to Hardgrave Military Academy for high school, and I went to Fork Union Military Academy, so that was our rival growing up. And
Yeah,
he actually graduated the same year that I did, so perhaps we had some passing. He's doing way better than I am because I'm doing a podcast and he's running a country. But,
Man.
so as we talk about really like predictive programming and kind of like that normalized dystopia, where conspiracy theorists often point to predictive programming, the ideal that dystopian ideals are seeded really into media to acclimate the public. Films like Ready Player One or Black Mirror, Westworld portray elite tech zones, implantable IDs, and privatized cities. To me, Prospera looks like the real world beta test, right? Critics argue it's not really coincidence, it's programming. If people can condition to accept corporate role and kind of this biometric control, and in fiction, I don't think they won't resist it in reality. Like they see it on TV, like they're just become accustomed to it. I saw Westworld on HBO. It was really cool. Wait, now it's here in our modern day society. That's fine. I'll deal with it. What do you think about it? Right? Like as people start to condition folks to kind of get used to this. I think that's a lot what we see in Prospera is the folks are going to start to launch their own independent cities and people that just want money. Because we see it in different parts of this world. It breeds towards that predictive programming. Do you see that coming to fruition?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit where, or at least in my opinion, like Prospera is like the baby that you've just introduced to the world and you're trying to normalize it. Right? I don't believe for a second that some of the stuff they're doing is the advanced technology, the advanced research. I think it's a way to put something out there that seems kind of innocuous where people can look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, I like the idea of having low taxes. I like the idea of no regulation because we drown in regulation in the Western world. So it's a cool idea and it seems attractive on the outside for sure. So I think Prospera is the first step, kind of normalize like high level technology, a lot of kind of libertarian policies in terms of no borders, low taxes, government that is truly ruled by the people. When in reality, I think it's just a minor reflection of the big thing that's going to come here in the next, who knows, decade, 100 years. But it's just like a little microcosm.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it's rolled by the people. And we're starting to see this now today where Elon Musk is starting the American Party, kind of oppose the Republicans, then oppose the Democrats, and have a third level Democratic Party in the United States. And we look at Prospera, it's like, would we rather have Trump in power or Elon Musk? Like, I start to see that deviation of somebody that's looking to make money or somebody that's looking to make money and also improve the country.
Dude, the other thing too is that in the past, I don't know, maybe past 12 years, like everything's come from like the call of a person out. Like Trump's funny. He's entertaining. Even with Joe Biden, you may not agree with him, but it was ridiculous some of the stuff he said and did. It's turned into entertainment. It's not necessarily always the best and brightest. It seems like anymore, it's the one who is the most outspoken, can make the funniest jokes, can have quippy remarks. So I think, and with all the social media and all the media we consume on a daily basis with our phones, with our laptops, with our TV screens, everybody is, Elon Musk said, the most likely outcome is the most entertaining one. And I have to agree with him because we want to be entertained. And it's a lot like Rome, man. It's bread and circus, and we're falling for it as a country and as a world.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was really interesting about living on the like cusp of communism in China and living in Hong Kong is my life didn't feel a whole hell of a lot different. Right? Like when I lived in Hong Kong versus the United States. And in fact, I felt like I had equal freedoms. I could do whatever I wanted during that time of my life. And I wonder if people, though, they just listen to politicians, and it's what can grab their attention, right? Like for that moment. So you almost have to be funny or be engaging in order for people to follow along with you during that time. I'm of the big belief, and most people disagree with me, but the person that's like rolling the United States really doesn't have a big burden on my life. My life is really not much different under Trump versus under Biden. Maybe the education system's getting fixed, right? Like we're getting rid of some of these poor policies, but living under these different rules and these different places throughout my life, it's been much of the same. And if we're willing to empower the wrong people to make decisions for us on a bigger scale than just our lonely lives in the corners of Pennsylvania or Maryland, and let them worry about the world, I worry about what's going to transpire in the future. And as people like Prospera gain bigger political power, as they continue to grow, they have an advantage over the United States, and not many countries do. But the advantage is that it's like modern day colonialism, right? Like they can just expand their borders. They can buy more land. They can go to other continents. They can settle new cities. I mean, they can continue to increase that scope. And now it's a decentralized nation, right? Like it might be, I don't know if Prospera Honduras versus Prospera Africa are going to live under the same rules and regulations. Is Eric Bremen going to run them all? I don't know what that case may be, but it's like you think about the United States military. They have bases all over the world because it's span of infants, right? Like you start to kind of have bases and you start to have control everywhere. And I just wonder, how big could it ultimately be?
Dude, I also, when I was researching Prospera, you know what came, and this is comparing apples to oranges here, so anyone listening don't think I'm suggesting. But you remember Jim Jones? He went down to South America, and that cult, they just set up in the middle of the jungle and had all these people, and was a very apparently persuasive guy, and got them all to drink Kool-Aid. Like, that's what I think of sometimes when I think of these little cults in South America. Like, is this like is this like a techno cult? Maybe they're not drinking literal poison juice, but they might be poisoning the genome for all of mankind or setting up the beast system. But it's kind of culty, man. Like I think any place that is that small, that is self-governed, can take on cult-like qualities.
And it's what the world revolves around, the almighty dollar. Okay, can I ingest more income? Can I keep it for myself? Can I build a bigger empire through that? And I think Jim Jones also it was about influence. That's what he cared about. I think, was it Costa Rica where he brought people? I think it was Costa Rica, but maybe it was some other South American country. But can I influence these people? And a lot of these people worship the ground that he walked on. It's really interesting. It's like that great reset, right? Like it's the great reset in order to have influence, power, money during those times.
It was Jonestown, Guyana. That's where he went.
Gotcha. Okay.
But what do you make of this $11 billion lawsuit? I mean, I can't imagine the GDP of Honduras is much more than $11 billion. Oh, you just want to take all their money? What do you make of it?
So I think what they're talking about when Prospera is suing the Honduran government is about how much investment that they have into that society. And if they were crushed by the Honduran government and they had to go away, go back to their country of origin, that's the investment that they would lose. So perhaps that's what they're worth, is $11 billion. And they want to get that paycheck if they're forced to leave. When they made the former agreement under the former president of Honduras during that time. I know there's a lot of division during that. If you watch some of these videos, some of the Honduran citizens support them and some absolutely hate them. They think they're like the Jim Jones cult, where they want to stand very, very far away. But I think that bill is about how much is invested and how much they can ultimately make as they have all these startup technology companies coming out there.
Put this in perspective. So the GDP for Honduras in 2024 was $36 billion. So they're asking for a third of a country's GDP. You've seen the videos of it. You spent $10 billion there. Come on. Unless there's an underground city we don't know about, you did not spend $10 billion. Like, you didn't. Maybe they're referring to like future, like, unrealized returns in the future, but $10 billion, they probably got all that property for less than $100 million, if I had to guess.
Oh, 100%. They did. I think you hit the nail on the head where it's unrealized return. So I think all these people like Sam Altman and these different tech billionaires are saying, I give you $100 billion to carve me out a spot or give me citizenship during that time. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. It's unrealized returns, but also what are they suing the Honduran government in the Honduran court? And they're probably not going to pay out.
No, they're definitely not. The only thing I can think of is that I think some of these special economic zones are governed under a UN treaty. So I almost think that the case would have to go to the UN. I'm like, are Honduras even part of the UN?
I have no
can't
idea.
imagine they are. But I know I know with other special economic zones, it's governed under some sort of treaty. And I assume that this falls into place. And I know the argument is, even though that president repealed uh, the ZA thing, there was some articles I was reading that it's still protected under international treaties for up to 50 years, even though I
Wow.
think Honduras declared it unconstitutional. So that fight, I don't know. I doubt they're going to win just because of all the pressure coming from the Western world and all these billionaires dumping money. This guy give a guy a check for $100 million. Hey, just chill. Let's forget about it. Just let us do our thing. And that government's prone to corruption as it is. I think the president that passed all this is actually sitting in federal president of the United States right now for drug trafficking.
Wow. That brings up an interesting point. Do you think the citizens should have some say in what they are doing there in Prospera? Right? Like the people that surround it. Could you imagine if somebody came out to Pennsylvania, set up an independent city right next door to you, and were living their lives? Not that they impacted you, but they were just next to you. Do you think the local residents should have some say in what's going on there?
Absolutely. If you live in a democracy, you should have a say. The thing I would be worried about if I was them, being that poor, knowing that they're expanding, I'd be worried about them pulling the whole eminent domain rule on you, taking your land for pennies on the dollar. If they're smart, they would go to the people that own it and say, "Hey, I'll sell it to you for $1 million and get the hell out of there." Because eventually they're going to encroach. They're going to expand their borders if the government doesn't do anything. But I do think, and it won't happen, but I do think the government should set up some protections and some price minimums. If that way, the price minimums on the land, so the billionaires can't say, "I'll give you $1,000 for that 40 acres," and screw it.
Yeah, I hate the eminent domain law. Right, because I'm a very strong advocate for property owners' rights, and people shouldn't encroach upon your ability to do whatever you want with your land, whether it's the government or people or whoever. This is a very fine line because they can purchase the land in the same token where they've bought it and they tilled the soil and they've built the buildings, they designed their regulations. But I always find myself at a crossroads there because I don't want people to come to my house and tell me what to do at all. Yeah. It's such a weird thing to think about. Like, it makes me wonder. It is like, is corporate governance the future, or is it truly like the end of democracy?
What comes? So the story about China buying like millions of acres of farmland in the United States. It kind of seems similar. So let's say we're enemies. Like we're friendly, but not right. We're always trying to one up or trying to spy or trying to take some form of power from one another. Can you imagine if there's a war and like China's like, we're just not going to let you grow? That's corporatism. That is, I own the land. Obviously, in a war, we just reclaim it. But even in this kind of Cold War we're doing with China, it's my land. You can't force me to farm. I mean, that's huge. So I think we experience some of it here in this country with other countries, big corporations buying up huge swaths of land that could be used for food, cattle, buying up wildlife, portions of wildlife reserves. And it is scary because land mass is finite. And in order to have a society that flourishes, you have to optimize the use. And if you have 10% of your land bought up by corporations or other governments, given our laws, you can't tell them what they can and can't do with it. It kind of reflects this like prosperity is kind of a microcosm of that, or potentially could be a microcosm of that, especially in a little island of Roatán.
Yeah. It makes me think, right? Because it's about the expand of control. When I worked at Amazon Web Services, one of the largest fiber line in the entire world runs through Northern Virginia to Washington, D.C. It was many years ago. It was put in the ground by the U.S. Army, and then it was sold off to private enterprise. And that's why the largest data center bank in the world is in Northern Virginia. Now, as they continue to buy land to build data centers for it, what it's ultimately doing is it's raising the electric price. So more people are paying much more money for their power bills. And a lot of people actually can't afford their mortgage anymore because they're paying $500-600 just to keep their lights on during the day. And they ultimately sell their land because they just have to get rid of it because they can't afford to keep the electric on. And you wonder places like Prospera that if I can't go to Jay Green's house and buy his land, how can I force him out? I could improve my property. I could raise your property tax, right? Because my property's worth more. The fact that you're located next to me, your property's worth more. And now you can't afford to pay the government for your property bill, then maybe the government will run you out of town and they will sell it to me. Or maybe you can't afford to keep your lights on because now electricity is scarce, or perhaps water, because a lot of data centers require a lot of water to keep it cool. Now water prices go up because water becomes more scarce as a tool. So that's why I believe in citizen's right in order to kind of block these things, even though I'm a very strong property rights owner, because it can actually influence you a little bit. You may come to Jay and say, I want your house. And you say, F you, give me $10 billion. I can probably find a better way to do it. I can raise your power bill. I can raise your tax bill. I can eventually run you out of town without ever arguing with you. I could just make it more difficult and more expensive for it. So that's why I kind of think that people should have some say in who their corporate neighbors are. And I always wonder, like when I worked at Amazon, I ran a large team for them. And every year I had to terminate somebody. Didn't matter if everybody on my team was great. Didn't matter. I had to terminate somebody because it kind of set the bar. Like you were the worst performer. Even if you were a good performer, you're the worst performer and I'm getting rid of you. And if I think about those kind of tech billionaires, if they're running society, what are they going to do to improve? Like if they're ultimately in control of everything, the laws, the governance, the tax bill, all the things, that's what scares me. Like I much rather live under Trump or even Biden than Jeff Bezos because I know what Jeff is end game is. Like his end game is to make money. So they're kind of worshiping that almighty dollar there. And that's what makes me concerned, right? And what we're seeing now is a society that's propped up where if you have more money, you're empowered. You have more voting rights. You have more determination of what that society is going to look like. And we see it in Russia, right? The oligarchs that they're passing out, hey, you want to own the oil company? Here you go. Just vote for me. And they influence it. And we see the same thing in China. We see the same thing in many countries.
It's just feudalism rebranding. It's corporate feudalism. You're the lord of the manor and all these people work for you and you own all the land and you give them the right to work, to live, to eat. It's scary. It's not, instead of having knights on horseback and spearmen, you have billions of dollars and advanced technology. And you can sit up in your castle tower and look down and be like, all right, this all belongs to me. I just have to find a way to make them think that it doesn't belong to me. So
it's that it comes down to that dollar theory, right? Because most people in this world will do anything for money, whether it's doing something crazy on Facebook or launching a YouTube series or whatever. If you're going to pay me $10, I'll go out and do it. Never start a podcast. Yeah. But it will do it. And I worry about a culture that's obsessed with that. That's their end game, is just to make money. I worry what that end game is going to look like. And, to start back to where we started this conversation about revelations. And I think it's very clear in the Bible, like the reason why they call out transaction. You have to get the mark of the beast or you can't buy anything. We're living in a transactional society that worships up the dollar now. And man, I don't know. It's, obviously we can't live without money, but at the same time, we can't revolve our lives around money. We have to make wise choices for our families and loved ones.
Yeah, I think that's the one big problem about a zero-sum game. Like you pay $1, it's accounted for, and it moves on. And I think the way our society's set up is I want the most dollars. And once you have, I always argue, like once you have so much money, it's really not a real thing to you anymore. Like if I had $100 billion, like money is not really, all my problems with money go away. So as a man and as a person who gets bored, I'm going to think of cool ways to spend this money that really has no value to me because I have so much of it. My great grandkids could live like kings. So then you start thinking of these weird ways to manipulate society and government. And hey, there's this cool island in Honduras. Let's go buy it. Let's just play around and see what happens.
It's true though. It's crazy to think about, but it is true. And I don't know. I would love to have $100 billion because I would retire and nobody ever see me again. But I guess a lot of people would use it to influence folks and influence the elections and influence all these things. What do you think the one positive and the one negative it is for us to take away today from this conversation?
So one negative. Man, I think I've said it 100 times, which is probably irritating for whoever's listening. But I think the negative is that we have these corporations who obviously influence our political arena, not only in the US, but all over the world. They manipulate governments. And now they're trying to create their own little cities and outposts to do what they want to do without the regulation, without the high tax burden. And it's a way to stuff more money in their pockets, either through lack of taxation, not giving back to society, or to circumvent regulation that could have a profound effect on those that live locally and around. Like, think about Wuhan. What if they're doing viral research? If it's not regulated, if there's no system set in place, what's to say they don't release something terrible? And I think that's scary.
Create the disease so you can release the cure. And what do you think is the one positive to take away?
I think the one positive is, and it is kind of reflective of the negative, is that if you want to look at the good side of it, is that you can create your own community, put up your own laws, not have a heavy tax burden, and not be heavily regulated. So I think it's good and bad. It really depends on people and their intentions and how they use it. It could be a paradise, it could be a utopia, or it could be a dystopia. Unfortunately, I think you can swing either way.
You think that's ultimately the American dream?
I think the American dream, man, is at least for me, the American dream is to have a beautiful, loving family, a bunch of land. Everyone leaves you alone. If your neighbor needs help, you help them. You don't have to rely on the government. You can work the land. You can buy, sell, and trade with fiat. You can invest. And you can help others. I think that's the American dream. It's not buying a house and having a car and working 65 hours a week just so you can see your wife for an hour on the weekend, go to one of your kids' baseball games, and not really know who the hell they are.
More what you sound like is... Yeah, so more so, I think what you're talking about is the biblical dream. Like Jesus' vision for our life. I think from a positive aspect, and I'll start on the flip side of the coin, is what we're seeing is a society being built from the ground up. Kind of paving their way forward, right? And for me, that is the American dream. You can take something, you can create it, you can build it, you can mature it, and hopefully that it pays off, right? And hopefully way it pays off is it improves the lives of those around you. Right? You take care of your neighbor, you take care of your friend, take care of your brother, and you're able to invest in that culture and the lives of folks. So are they doing that? I don't know, but I think they have the opportunity to do a lot of good, right? To exit out of a society that's broken and come together to build something ultimately that's amazing, right? And the other positive really is that if they're working on medical research that's being blocked by FDA to cure HIV, to work on cures versus treatments, I think that's ultimately better, right? Like in order to cure cancer, instead of selling you chemo and selling you pills to take, I think they have the opportunity. And what that's really exciting about a new culture is the amount of opportunity that is giving. Now, it's ultimately up to Eric and it's up to Prospera of what they're going to do with that opportunity. Are they going to fall back on the dollar, or are they going to fall back on hope of what God and Christ has given us for society? Negative, man, my negative spirals down a deep, dark hole of the mark of the beast and fallen societies and the end of the world. It's two very hopeful extreme. Like one, we're marching towards Christ, and one, we're firmly marching away. And, it's a flip of a coin. Ultimately, what they choose to do with it, whether make or break it.
So I think the one thing that might be the elephant in the room is, so it's 1,000-acre property attached to a big country, a militarized country. If Honduras is ever just get sick of it, what's to keep them from going? It's taking it. Obviously, money and power and influence from Western nations, but they could just say they could go in there and kick them out, and there's nothing they could do about it. And that's kind of the elephant in the room. So that leads me to believe that some of this drama about them declaring it unconstitutional, yet it's still there, it just leads me to believe that they're being paid. Here's money. Let's let it be.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I'll actually drop the link into our podcast here. But as I saw in yesterday, they're actually shutting down some of their buildings. They, like some of the buildings that they've launched to do medical research, they've actually barred the doors. They've like dropped military personnel in there to stop people from going to work every day. We're talking about a society that is ultimately viewed as very corrupt, and they probably are getting payouts. But at the same time, maybe the former president got a whole lot more payouts, and that's why he allowed them Prospera to establish there. Versus the new president is maybe getting payouts from somewhere else, and that's why they're trying to prevent it.
Yeah, point.
But it's I think we're living on the flip of a coin, man. It could either go bad or it could go really good.
You mentioned something earlier. You said that do you know where in Africa they're trying to expand?
I don't. It's a good question. Let me look it up real quick. I'll cut out the blank space.
It was interesting. I actually I typed in podcast. You probably add this to the podcast if you want while you're researching.
Okay.
It was interesting. I got on my I have the Apple podcast thing on my phone, and I typed in Prospera, and I listened to this podcast with this, I can't remember the woman's name. She seemed lovely, but she's an African, and she was interviewing a resident and worker at Prospera. And it was an interesting conversation to have. If you want me to find a link to her podcast, I can give that to you as well. But the person she was interviewing had nothing but great things to say about Prospera. She said it gave her a job, gave her families a job, helped bring in tourism, just glowing rave reviews about how positive it was for her and her family. And she was kind of spinning the narrative counter to what some of the other locals are saying, that it's bad and it's a drain, but I can send that link.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. So where they're actually planning on being established is in Senegal, which Mali is to the east and Guyana is to the southeast of it. And it's kind of towards the Gambia, or the narrow country that's almost entirely surrounded by Senegal. Right. So it's kind of in the heart of Africa. What's interesting about it is the country actually has a strategic Atlantic coastline with the capital of Dakar sitting on the westernmost point of the African mainland, which as an upstart society, you would want control trade routes. Like you would want the ports of entry and have the boats to be able to dock within your society. So Senegal is actually a very strategic place to have it. And as we look at history, Senegal was actually a major hub of transatlantic slave trade during that time. So it's been a historic kind of slave port during those times in that port, and the shipping lane still exists today, which is, if I was talking about a place, I would want big airports or big waterways where I could ship goods somewhere else.
It's also interesting that they choose these countries that are so poor, and not only poor economically, but probably very poor in terms of governance. Probably a lot of not only poor governance, terrible laws, but I don't know anything about Senegal, but I'm just taking a leap of faith here. I'm assuming it's somewhat corrupt as well. It's just interesting to target.
I think it ultimately comes down to the dollar, right? So it's what countries can you pay enough to let you do what you want? All right, brother. So here is the question, and I'll leave you with today. You think, are cities like Prospera the solution to broken systems, or are they the beginning of something far more dangerous?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I mean, I think the solution to our broken systems is Jesus Christ, his ultimate kingdom. As men and women, we're going to screw everything up we do. Especially when you get millions or billions of people together. Like, no one's ever going to agree on the system. I think it's just another rendition. There's a saying from the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just another way to manipulate, to colonize, to take advantage of poor people that have bad governments. It's not the solution. The ultimate solution is,
I say amen to that. The ultimate solution is to have discernment, keep your eyes focused on Christ, and live a good life. And we can't control everything that's out there, but what we can control is what's inside our hearts and what we do for our families, friends, and for the society that surrounds us. So whether Prospera is the answers or not, you have to decide for yourself. But for this guy, I'm not visiting anytime soon.
you have to give you a free week vacation at their sweet resort? Come on, we'll go down a second.
No.
Hey, Prospera, we want a free weekend, travel for at least 10, and we'll come down and check it out and give you a good review.
There you go.
All right, brother.
Put me up on a beachside cabana.
All
Yeah.
inclusive, too.
Bro.
All inclusive.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening. Jesus loves you. I love you. I love you, brother. It was fun.
Yep. Love you. Love Jesus. Love you guys. We'll see you next time.
We've hit the 0 hour. That's a wrap on this week's transmission. New episodes drop weekly, so stay tuned and don't miss the next signal. Follow, subscribe, and spread the word. You've been listening to Zero Signal. We're out.